welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, we're going to be speaking to Alex Mason, or Puff Puff. She is a 34-year-old Brit who has quit her full-time job as a graphic designer in search of something different. She's also one of the co-founders of Love Her Wild. Some of her past adventures have included climbing Kilimanjaro, through hiking the PCT in 2015 from Mexico to Canada, and then back again. So in 2016 from Canada to Mexico, and 2016, 2017, she's been over in New Zealand, and she is currently traveling and doing incredible adventures. But I'll let Alex introduce herself and tell everybody a little bit more about her. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
So, oh my goodness, you've just got this incredible list of challenges and these adventures that you've been on. But like I do with all of my guests, I want to go back to the start. I want to find out a little bit more about you growing up. Were you adventurous as a child? Were you out there loving walking and climbing mountains? You know, what was your childhood like?
Well, I didn't climb any mountains as a child, but I walked quite a lot. My parents completely into walking everywhere. We lived in the middle of the city, so walking was perfectly natural. But I never imagined that I would be doing something so long as a long distance trail when I was growing up. So I think my granddad was always pretty adventurous, and I saw him go off, take a backpack, go to Australia in his, I think he was in his 50s. So he went off and had his own adventures. And I think that may have ignited a spark in me that I didn't really know at the time. But I've since, taken inspiration from him, and my parents have always been super supportive and not stopped me going off and doing anything crazy. My grandparents and my parents now, they live in the Canary Islands. So I've been traveling backwards and forwards for many years. And I think that's where it all began, really.
Did you have, I'm trying to say like this in quotations, like a normal life? Did you go to school, university, get the job, get the career? Was that the pathway that you first took?
Yeah, I definitely had a normal kind of a route that you tend to follow. I went to school, university, studied graphic design in Kent, and then finished university, decided I really wanted to do something before going to get a job. So I went to Africa for 6 months, but it wasn't independent travel. It wasn't anything particularly unusual. I did an overland truck tour from Nairobi to Cape Town, and I volunteered in Tanzania for a couple of months, helping to build a secondary classrooms for a school there. And it was amazing. I had the time of my life, met some amazing people, and it kind of encouraged me to want to go out and have that experience with meeting more people from all around the world. We had Canadians, Americans, I can't remember however many Australians, different nationalities on the truck. And it was a bit of an eye-opener, really, to see people from all around the world doing this. And it was probably the thing that was always inside me afterwards, just thinking about that quite a lot. After I came back, I went and got the job and did all the things I thought I was supposed to do. And followed that path, really, that you're expected to.
So what changed? I mean, I know, to be honest, like when I was reading through your blog, I was literally like, oh my God, I've done that, like climbing Kilimanjaro, like cutting my hair off, donating it to charity. It's like, I've done that. I felt like a real, as though we'd almost been on this similar path or similar journey. Was there a point for you when you were working in your job and you just thought that you didn't want to do it anymore, you wanted a change, or you needed some time off? Like, how did that evolve? How did that happen?
Yeah, there definitely was a point where I questioned what I was doing and whether I wanted to do it. And I think it was when after I went to Africa and came back and tried to get a job, I kind of struggled a little bit with breaking into the graphics industry, and I ended up doing bitty jobs here and there. And I tried to build up my own business as a freelancer and but it was 24/7 almost. It was definitely 7 days a week, working one job and then coming home and working in the evenings. And I really wanted to like break into that big career that I worked so hard towards. Got the degree, and all of my high school, secondary school years were focused on art and design and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, I've worked towards this for so long. This is what I need to do. And eventually, I did break down those doors and I got a full-time job in a studio, and I did enjoy it for a while, but I started to question what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I think also the industry I was working in is a fashion-based industry, and I didn't like the image we were putting out there. So the unachievable, highly airbrushed, retouched images that you see in magazines and things. And I just didn't want to be a part of that. So that started me off questioning what exactly it was I wanted to do. And I didn't really have the answer to that. But I knew that I wanted to do something different.
Did you speak to many people about the thoughts that you were having and, wanting to do something different? Or was it something that you kept almost quiet? And I say hidden, but, because sometimes it can be very difficult to speak out loud, like the massive, scary dreams that you may have, or wanting to go against social norms.
Yeah, and I did speak to a few people, and everyone was really encouraging. And the first time, when I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail the first time, I managed to take a sabbatical from my job. And it was a little scary because I'd never heard of long distance hiking before. So I found out about it in probably April 2014. And so it was about a year until I found out about the trail, and then was at the start ready to hike. And I kind of had all these barriers that I put in the way. I thought, well, my work won't give me the time off. I have a house. I won't be able to rent the house out. All sorts of obstacles. I wouldn't be able to afford it, all this type of stuff. And then I gradually started asking questions. I asked work tentatively about the time off, and they said yes. And then I inquired about renting my house, and they said, yes, it's going to be really easy. And then I kind of did some calculations. I thought, well, I probably could afford this. And all of a sudden, there was no backing out. I was like, right, well, I have to do this now. But there were obstacles that I thought were in the way, but actually it turned out that they weren't obstacles at all.
What do you think was the biggest obstacle that was stopping you from sort of taking the first step?
I was probably fear. The same with most things, really. Fear of failing, fear of not enjoying it, fear of getting hurt, having to come back and admit that maybe you don't enjoy it, or maybe you weren't very good at it, or maybe you failed. It's a scary thing. I don't particularly like failing at things, so that was a big deal for me to worry about. Well, it's silly worrying about what hadn't ever happened. So, the fear is probably a big obstacle.
Why do you think it was the PCT, the Pacific Crest Trail? Like, what was it about it that drew you to that particular thru hike?
Well, I remember vividly the day I first read about it, and it was on Facebook, and there was a link to it from Cotswold Outdoors, and I remember clicking on it. I don't really normally click on stuff like that on Facebook, but something drew me to it. And I read about it, and I just got completely absorbed in it. And I started more and more research, and saw there was blogs, and there was a whole website dedicated to it. And there are people walking across America, which I thought just sounded insane. And there was a footpath you can follow that goes all the way across America. Mad. And then I found out that there were two other trails of a similar fashion, the Continental Divide and the Appalachian Trail. But there was something about the PCT because it was the first one I read about and did so much research into. And I just felt like I had a bit of a connection with it from all the town names, and you read so much about it. You just want to go there. So I couldn't get that one out of my mind. However much research I did into all the other trails, that was the one I wanted to do because it was the one I read about first.
Do you know what I still think is amazing is I kind of remember when I first heard about these like long distance hiking trails, and it almost shocked me to think, God, I've reached like 35 years old, yeah, and like how have I never heard of them before, but
yeah, what else is out there that we don't know about?
Exactly. I mean, the Pacific Crest Trail is a whole different beast. 2,650 miles, which is 4,265 kilometers from Mexico to Canada, running through California, Oregon, and Washington. So take us back to the beginning. Like, to suddenly, did you get like your visa, or, you know, and then what happened, or did you just go and get a stamp, or, you know, yeah, talk us through it.
So you have to, if you want to stay in America for longer than 90 days, you have to apply for a B2 tourist visa. It's very simple. You just go to the embassy in London, and I was quite worried about mine just because it's America, you know, and they're fairly strict on things. And I had all the paperwork I needed with me. I had proof that I had a house, proof that I had a job to come back to, bank statements showing I had the funds to support myself, everything I thought they would want to look at. Went to the embassy, sat there for about 3 hours until I got called. And then the lady behind the counter just said, so what's your reason for wanting to enter the United States? I said, I want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And she said, oh, wow, like Reese Witherspoon. Cool. And just gave me a stamp. She didn't look at any of my paperwork. She just went, oh, that'll be great. Have fun. And that was my visa process. But yeah, so the visa was very straightforward. And I don't think it's much of a problem for most people to get a B2 visa. But it doesn't guarantee that you can stay in the country for as long as you want. So you have to go through American immigration as well. And it's basically, they have the final say. So it depends who you get on the day. They're supposed to give you a minimum of 6 months, which is fine to hike a trail. You can do it in 6 months. You can ask for longer, but they're not guaranteed to give it to you. But I've heard a story of some people I got put in touch with who had hiked the trail a couple of years before I did. They live in Scotland, and I managed to meet up with them and chat to them. And they said when they got to the border that the guy said, why are you entering the United States? They said, we want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And the guy said, oh, my brother's doing that. Cool. How long do you need? They said 6 months. He went, you can have 8. So it really depends on who you get. But yeah, you get a nice person and you're all right.
So you're out in America now. You're at the start line. What's going through your head? Were you freaking out? Were you super calm? Were you relaxed? What was happening?
It seemed very surreal. There was such like a year-long build up to it. And it felt very kind of out of body almost experience, because I couldn't quite believe I was stood there. I couldn't quite believe the enormity of the task ahead of me. I didn't really want to think about what I was about to do other than getting to the first camp. That's all I could think about. And in San Diego, there are these incredible trail angels trail angels are people that provide the hiking community with all sorts of wonderful things. And these two people open their home to all sorts of hikers, basically at the start of the hiking season. And they have hundreds and hundreds of hikers come through their home, and they feed you and they take you to the trailhead, and they do runs to REI and to the supermarket and get you fully prepared. And if you're international, you're allowed to stay for up to 4 days. Americans can stay for a night, but they help you get settled, get over your jet lag and all that kind of stuff. And they take you. And when I was there, there were a whole bunch of us. I'm going to say maybe 15 people that they took to the trailhead, and we all started there at the same time. And it was very odd because we had our photos taken individually and then all big group ones. And then we all just started walking, and it was like, well, there's nothing left to do. We just have to start walking. And then you just kind of walk off into the distance and you think, what am I doing? This is very weird. And you have a very kind of nervous excitement going on. And you just think, I've just got to make it to the next campsite. And it was a tough day. It was probably one of my toughest days on the trail. The first day was maybe the hardest. Yeah.
I mean, just from through hiking the Appalachian Trail, I know that basically we could talk about the PCT for hours and hours and hours. Yeah. But was there a particular highlight for you, a particular moment, a particular day, a particular experience that really stands out in your memory?
Goodness me. I mean, so many. But I think one of the main things that stands out for me is one of the big reasons I wanted to hike the trail is because I've always had dodgy hips. I've had slight problems. I've had bursitis, and they click a lot, and they just cause me problems really most of the time. And I didn't even know if I was going to be able to walk 20, 30, 100 miles, 1,000 miles. I didn't know how far I was going to get. I did a training. I walked the Thames Path as training, but I mean, that's nothing like walking the Pacific Crest Trail because it's completely flat. And it really hurt me, actually. And I thought, well, I don't know how far I'm going to get. And at one point in my life, I had tests to see if I have had arthritis in my hips. And that kind of gave me a little scare in a way, because I thought, I'm not guaranteed to have my health forever. So I want to do something pretty big while I still can. And I remember I'd been on the trail maybe a week, and I started to get really bad pain in my hips. And for me, the problem happens when my hips don't click and there isn't that release. My right hip wasn't clicking at all, and it was getting tighter and tighter and more painful, to the point where I was like shuffling when I was walking. I was just really, really struggling. And I just sat down. I was by myself, and I thought, I don't think I can do this. And I've been on the trail a week, and I'm going to have to go home and tell everybody that I failed. And I just thought, I don't want to give up yet. And I hiked along, and I remember seeing a girl you've had on your podcast actually already, Kat Davis. We hiked in the same year. We started on the same day. And I remember stopping, and I think she was sat eating something, and I was leaning against a rock. And I remember just chatting to her and explaining my injuries. And I just pushed my hip out to one side, and it gave the most enormous crack, like a gunshot going off. It was huge. And then suddenly I felt amazing. I was like, this is great. And I flew up the trail. I didn't really, I was still walking slow, but I felt like I was flying up the trail, because it was just that tension had released in my hip. And I felt so good, because I just was feeling so despondent before, and just kind of woe is me, and like really self-pitying. And I just suddenly thought, maybe I can do this. And it was a real turning point for me on the trail, from going from thinking I was basically going to have to give up to thinking that maybe this is something I could do. So that was a real moment for me. A couple of weeks into the trail, it's like something came up and smacked me on the back of the head, because I suddenly realized where I was. And I was like, I'm actually hiking this trail. This is nuts. It's just sudden realization dawned on me. And I cried. I was in the middle of the desert, and I just cried because the emotion was so overwhelming. And then you realize you're there on your own, and you kind of think, well, I've just got to carry on now. So you just carry on walking. But there's so many moments like that, just hundreds of them.
I mean, I think with the trail as well, you do have these incredible highs and these incredible low points, but you also have these times or these experiences where it is like a mental game. For me, it was night hiking in the Whites, and like obviously on the Appalachian Trail, but like almost like getting lost and not being able to find my way, and just having to really tell myself to calm down and to breathe, and it's all going to be okay. For you on the trail, what fear did you face and overcome? Was it bears or lightning or snow?
So I did see a few bears on the trail. I saw more going south than I did going north, but to be honest, they weren't scary. The rattlesnakes were pretty scary, just because they're so well camouflaged, and it's really easy not to see them. And I almost stepped on one. I was so close, and that was pretty scary. Funny you should mention lightning as well, because I never thought I was really that scared of lightning. But when you're in it, it's a whole different story. And I remember we were on this really exposed ridge, and this big storm came in. And I remember, in the old days when the TVs used to turn off and it used to go into like a white line in the middle and into like a white dot. That just basically happened in front of me. And it must have been some kind of lightning strike. And it was really, really scary, but there's nothing you can do but keep going forwards, because the ridge I was on was full of burn area. So there was nothing to shelter under. And I'm not even sure you should shelter under a tree in a lightning storm, but there was nowhere to go. So you just had to keep going and just really keep your fingers crossed and hope for the best. But that was a particularly terrifying moment. I don't like night hiking, so I tried it a couple of times and didn't really enjoy it. So I tried my best to avoid the night hiking, because everything becomes a lot scarier in the dark. Any innocent little forest in the day with its like nice little chirping birds and nice sounds become sinister at night. With a tree branch cracking becomes instantly terrifying. So I try to not do too much night hiking. Yeah.
So when did you complete the PCT in 2015?
So I finished on September the 7th on my birthday, which was a nice little treat. I heard you finished on your birthday too, so that's always...
I was just about to say, I did the same thing.
Yeah, completely unintentional. It just happened that way. But yeah, it was a great birthday, and and one I'll definitely remember for the rest of my life.
And what was it like for you coming home and making that adjustment back into life? Obviously you had your job waiting for you. Did you start like straight away? Did you take some time out?
So it was, finishing the Pacific Crest Trail was fairly emotional, but I was okay because I had another adventure to go on to. I was due to go to the Himalayas and climb Mera Peak. So I went off and I had I think it was 3-week turnaround, a week in the States and then a couple of weeks at home. And then I was off to the Himalayas with some good friends. So that was nice to see them. So I had something to look forward to. So it wasn't too hard, a transition. But then after I finished in the Himalayas, was there for a month, came back and went to the Canary Islands where my parents lived to spend some time with them. Hadn't seen them for a while. And then just before Christmas, which is a really stupid idea, I went back to work. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was basically like I had stepped back into work the day after I left, and it was like nothing had changed. The people hadn't changed. The work I was doing was exactly the same. And it was like the last 8 months I think I took off had all been a bit of a dream, and it didn't really happen. And it was quite, I can't think of the word, but it was difficult to deal with, very difficult to deal with. And I was very emotional at work. I remember my creative director coming up and talking to me, and I just burst into tears. I cried at my desk and I thought, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. You can't be at work crying at your desk. You need to change something. So I decided that I was there for, I think, a couple of months when I decided to quit my job completely and decided it wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. So yeah, it was a really, really tough transition going back home and everything just still being the same.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. I can completely relate. So
yeah.
So you've had the 8 months off. You've headed over to Nepal to climb a mountain. Tell us a little bit about Mera Peak.
So Mera Peak is, I think it's 6,476, something like that. Let's say 6,500 meters high, and it's classed as one of the highest trekking peaks. So you don't have to have any technical skill to do it, but you do still. You learn the technical skill you need when you're over there, basically. So it's about using crampons and using a jumar and walking on a glacier and walking when you're roped together with other people, which I found quite challenging. But it was a bit of a progression for me, having done Kilimanjaro, failed to get to the top of that because I was so woefully underprepared. Going to Everest Base Camp and trying to put that right in my mind, I wanted to achieve that. So got there. And then, the Himalayas are impossible not to fall in love with. They're just one of the most beautiful places in the world. So always knew I wanted to go back. And with some of the people that I met on Everest Base Camp on that trek, I did with Charity Challenge. And it was a group of strangers at the time, but we all made some friends, and a group of us from that trek decided we wanted to go back to the Himalayas. So we arranged this Mera Peak trip together. And in the past, I had suffered fairly badly with altitude sickness for both of my my climbs. And I was pretty worried about this one because it was higher and more difficult. But I don't know whether it was altitude, they say, doesn't relate to fitness. But I found it not easy, but I definitely didn't suffer like I did on the other two, which was great for me. But it was a tough climb, and very, very. The thing that sticks out in my mind is how cold it was. It was about -25 when we did the push to the summit. So you start at around 2 in the morning, and you're roped together. You've got your crampons on, and I was. There were 3 groups, I think. Two or three, I can't remember, but I was in the first group, and I was with 2 guys, and I was at the back, and every time they felt the rope tighten, it was me kind of just thinking I can't even go any further. And it was the type of climbing where you walk 2 paces and then have to stop and catch your breath and just restock, and then you move on another couple of paces, and it hurts to breathe because the air is so cold. My nose was like a tap. The Sherpa behind me was incredible because he was tying my shoelaces. He gave me another jacket because I was so cold. He was blowing my nose for me. He was giving me sips of hot water to try and warm me up. And eventually you just keep on going, 2 more steps. And then you start to see the sun, and you think, the sun is the most amazing thing in the world because it really, like, you can feel the heat more than you've ever done before. And eventually you make it to the top, and there's a little climbing portion at the top where you have to use your ice axe and a rope and stuff, but it's fairly short. I think it's only about 50 meters, something like that. And then you get to the top and you have a spectacular view of Everest. It looks like you could just like hop over there and see Everest, but obviously it's still very far away, but it's an incredible view, and you can see I think it's 5 of the 8,000 meter peaks in a panoramic view. So it's really stunning. And everything around you in the dark is twinkling, and the ice is twinkling, the sky is twinkling. It's just I just remember between the feelings of I think I'm going to die because it's so cold, I just remember how incredible the beauty of my surroundings was, and how it was just everything was twinkling. Yeah, so it was a pretty awesome experience.
I have to say, after going through something like that, like coming back just before Christmas and starting back at your job and sat behind the desk and getting on the commute, it must, click of a fingers, you're back to reality, or the reality that you've chosen to come back to. But obviously did that for a few months, and then you couldn't do it anymore. You quit your job full time. Now, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but first of all, what did you decide to do next? What did you decide to do next?
So I'm sure you know this, but when you're on a trail, there's lots of talk about other trails and what people are going to do next, and long distance hiking options around the world. And I heard a lot about the Te Araroa in New Zealand, which goes from Cape Reinga to Bluff, so tip of the North Island to the tip of the South Island. And that was a trail that really captured my interest, more so than going back to America at the time. And New Zealand's been a place I've wanted to go for many, many years, but never thought a 2-week holiday was worth going that far. So I've always wanted to do it on a bit of a grander scale. And I thought, what grander scale can you get than walking the whole length of it? So this was February time, and I thought, I'm going to make the decision to do this trail. I know logistically I can do it. But I thought the season doesn't really start till October, November. And I thought there's no way I can stick this out until then. It will kill me. It will just be too much. I'll get kind of, I'm not going to say depressed, because I'm not ever been a depressed person, but I'll sink into a place I didn't want to be. So I thought, well, what can I do in between? And I thought, well, the PCT requires no planning because I know exactly what I'm doing, and I could just go south. And I thought, southbound finishes in November. I could just go straight from LA to Auckland. And I looked it all up and I managed to find some reasonably priced flights. And I thought, yeah, I'm just gonna southbound the PCT, which seems mad, and it is mad. And I think I did have just a moment of pure madness when I thought about it. But again, it was one of those things where I said to myself, I'm going to do this, and then the ball started rolling and things started happening, and then suddenly there I was at the start, about to hike the trail again.
Boom, this time southbound.
Yeah.
To be fair, like, I'm glad you explained that, because generally I'm sure the questions would be, you've already hiked it once and you came back and then hiked it back in the same in a different direction. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, people think I'm completely mad for wanting to do it twice, but I can't make people understand how amazing the trail is and how it captures your heart. You know, I think I definitely left a piece of my heart out there. And actually going southbound is a very different experience to going northbound. So even though it is the same trail, you get a very different experience when you do them in different ways. And it's a lot quieter when you head south. Lots more people go northbound. About 90% choose to go north and 10% choose to go south. So apart from that, the couple of weeks where you're crossing all the northbounders in Oregon somewhere, it's south of Oregon, very, very quiet on the trail. And the seasons are different. You start in Washington when you go south, you start when all the wildflowers are out and it's beautiful and green and lush and incredible. There's still a few bits of snow on the ground. And when you go north and you hit Washington in September, October, then all the autumn colors are starting to show, and it's still beautiful. They're both ways are incredibly beautiful. But the hard bit about going south is that you are under a little bit more time pressure, because you know, the days are getting shorter. It starts to get a lot colder, and, you know, the winter's coming. So you need to get through the Sierra before the first snowfall, and you need to be done really before it starts to get too cold and miserable. But they're worth hiking both ways, because they're very different.
Were you calmer? I don't want to use the word calmer, but were you nervous about heading back to the PCT this time? Because now you've snapped, you know, you've cut those strings from your job. You don't have a job to go back to. And after the PCT, you're going to be catching a flight, heading over to New Zealand. So this has almost become, you know, a choice for you about how you want to live your life. So what were the emotions that were happening when you started?
It was definitely easier having something that you knew you were going to come back to, because you didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to think about the future, really. You were happy kind of the here and now. You knew you were doing this, and when it was over, you knew you had something to go back to. It was definitely a worry to have packed everything in and not really have a future plan, but it was also quite liberating. You know, you can do whatever you want to do. It's your decision. You're not tied to coming back to England. You're not tied to a job. You don't have any responsibility for anything. So it was quite freeing. But yeah, there was that element of, oh God, what am I going to do when this is over? But you have to really try and not let those fears get in the way of your experience, because if you spend the whole time worrying about what you're going to do after, it spoils your enjoyment of the trail, you know. So, and also I was lucky because I had another trail to go to. And that kind of stopped me worrying so much, especially on the PCT, about what was next, because I knew what was next. It was New Zealand. So that does help a lot. And
did you have you'll have to tell us what your trail name was for your first round one. And did you keep the same trail name when you headed southbound?
I kept the same name. I grew quite attached to my name. So my trail name was Puff Puff. And it was due to the fact that I had an abnormally kind of puffy coat, because they all call them the down jackets. They all call them puffies over in the States. And but I also had a puffy vest, so like a gilet thing, because one of my biggest fears was being cold. I don't like being cold, so I made sure that I had enough layers to keep me warm. And I just remember I was pulling all my kit out. There was a guy, two guys, one called Bubba Gump and one called Ranger. I hope I got that right. And they saw me setting my stuff up for the evening, and I kept pulling out all this stuff made of down. So I pulled out my jacket, my gilet, put that on, and then my jacket, that on, and then I pulled my sleeping bag out. And they were just like, "How many puffy things do you have?" And they started calling me Double Puff, and I couldn't say that with a straight face. I didn't. When people asked me what my name was, I just used to laugh and be like, "Double Puff." And then another friend I had on the trail, one of a couple called the Tits, they renamed me Puff Puff, and it stuck. And I just don't think I could go by anything else now. Really, that's mine, and it's probably what I'm going to stick to. So
no, I love it. How are your feet? Because I mean, I don't know if you've ever done the maths, like from the northbound, the southbound, the Tuaroa. Like, how many miles must you have walked over the past sort of 3 years? And just how are your feet coping?
Yeah, it's quite a lot of miles. So 2,650 twice, and then 1,860 on the Tuaroa. So that's quite a lot. My feet are actually fine, but now, because I haven't hiked, I mean, the first round of the PCT, I got a few blisters in the normal places, on your little toes and on the side of your heels, and but they soon disappeared, and the calluses came, and it was okay. And then southbound, I didn't really get any blisters other than a very small one in like that crease of your foot between the ball of your big toe and the rest of your toes, because my feet were wet for about 3 days constantly. So I got a little blister in between there. But really, I found some really good shoes that really worked for me. Shoes are a very personal thing. Everyone's feet are different, so it's great when you're able to find a pair of shoes that really work for you. So my feet have been fine, and now they're kind of real soft pansy feet, because I haven't walked anywhere for a while. I've been on my bike, so they're very soft. And I think now if I did walk somewhere, I'd probably get a few blisters afterwards.
So had you actually paid for your flight from LA?
Yes.
So I suppose the reason I asked that was, so there was actually like a time pressure now when you were hiking southbound. Did that change anything for you in terms of walking? Did you like having that pressure? Did you have enough time to make sure you got there? Were you ever like, oh my goodness, I need to up the miles?
So I always knew that I would be able to do it. Having done it before, I knew that I probably wouldn't take more time. It would probably be likely that I would take a little bit less time. And it's quite common to do a southbound quicker than it is to do a northbound. I'm not really sure why that is. But I wasn't concerned about the pressure of time regarding my flight. But the biggest pressure I felt was there's a lot of, grapevine kind of talk along a trail. And it's the pressure of getting through the Sierra Nevada before the first snowfall. The pressure is intense, and it's basically all anyone talks about for the first part of the trail before you get there. It's like, oh, are you going to get there before then? And there's a trail kind of town called Kennedy Meadows, and it's all about when Kennedy Meadows is going to shut down for the winter, and you need to get there before then to get your resupply box and all this talk. It's pretty much mass panic in some parts, and that you start to put heaps of pressure on yourself, and in the end it works out fine. I got through before there was any snow. We did have a little bit of snow in the Sierra, but nothing major. Kennedy Meadows was still open, and it was all fine. But you tend to put these pressures on yourself, and you have to sit back and you think, if it is closed, I'll have to find another option. If it does snow in the Sierra, there are lots of exit points, and you just come out and you just do the sensible thing. But you do get a lot of pressure for continuous footsteps, and you feel bad if any part of the trail is closed, which it often is in California and Washington because of wildfires and things. And I think I've read or somebody said that the PCT changes every year. So the trail is what is available to you at the time you hiked. So there was one section that was closed for me in Northern California because of a huge wildfire. So, I mean, it wasn't going to be a sensible decision to go through it. So you go around it, and that's what the trail is in that particular year.
Mentally, what is happening mentally? Because that's a huge amount of time, like out in the woods, out in nature. Were you by yourself? Were you with other people? Was there loneliness? What was happening inside your head?
So I never really felt particularly lonely. Northbound, there's always people around, and I made some really great friends and hiked with various groups of people, and had basically a wonderful time. It was never something I intended to do as in something to find myself. People do those things where they have to give themselves like a long, hard look at inside or whatever. I've always been fairly comfortable with myself, and I've never felt the urge to need to find complete solitude and look at myself in that way. I actually really enjoy the social aspect of these adventures, and I enjoy meeting new people and making new friends and things. So Northbound is a very social experience. It's a bit less so when you go southbound. But I was super lucky to have a great friend on the trail with me who I met when I went north, a lady called, her trail name is Catwater. And she probably won't mind me saying this, but she's 63, I think. And we made plans to start this trail together when we went southbound. So we met in Washington and hiked to the monument and hiked through Washington together. And then she actually had a portion of the trail she had already done. So she skipped ahead, and I walked as fast as I could to try and catch her up and try to do the Oregon 2-week challenge to get through Oregon in 2 weeks. And I think I did it in 15 days. So I was very close, but I was still quite pleased with myself. And I eventually managed to catch her up somewhere in Northern California. And we hiked the rest of the trail together. We didn't always hike side by side. In fact, we never hiked side by side. But we always decided where we were going to camp and went into towns together. And yeah, we had a great time. It was a really special experience for me to be able to share a large portion of the trail with another person, and especially her, because she was awesome company. So yeah, I never felt lonely, really.
Yeah, no, it's weird, like, because people ask me that question, and I was always like, no, I quite like my own company. I find myself really entertaining.
Yeah, because in the daytimes, obviously, I was alone a lot, but I still never felt lonely. So yeah, like you say, I'm happy in my own company, but I'm also happier camping with other people.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, Alex, one of the questions that I know a lot of people will be thinking is going to be, so, you took a 8-month sabbatical, you've done the PCT one way, you've done the PCT the other way, and flown over to New Zealand, you've hiked the Tiora, which I still want to talk about, and then then you cycled Oz. It's going to be the money side of things. And to be fair, it's one of the questions which I think as women, like, I know I'm particularly bad at like talking about money. Like, it's, I think we've all been brought up not to really talk about it. You should, it's not polite, etc. But I'm just going to ask you, like, how are you funding your life at the moment? How have you funded these incredible trips?
So I'm pretty good at saving. I don't want to say waste my money, but I don't waste my money on lots of going out for dinner, drinks. I don't drink a lot of alcohol, so I don't spend a lot of money on alcohol. I don't buy a lot of clothes other than trail items, which I will be happy to spend a lot of money on. But yeah, I'm very careful when I'm at home about what I'm spending. And I managed to save up a reasonable amount of money. But I'm also lucky that I own a house and I'm able to rent that out while I'm away. So that gives me a small income each month. It's not a huge amount. It's around £500 a month, which will sustain a lifestyle where you're mostly living in your tent and hiking every day. And it will buy, all the Cheetos and Oreos you could want to eat. So yeah, I'm lucky that I have that asset behind me, and I realize that not everyone does have the luxury of having that. So that's mostly how I'm able to keep going. By coming to, America and New Zealand and Australia are fairly expensive countries to be in, but coming over to Asia, where everything's a little bit cheaper, you're able to get some of that money back, really. And I know I've just been exceptionally lucky. And when I hiked with Catwater, she helped me out a lot by not allowing me to pay for any of the accommodation we stayed in. So, I mean, not everyone is going to have an incredible friend like that to help them out, but I got very lucky with the people I met. And I'm very aware that how lucky I have been, actually.
Are you still working? Because with being a graphic designer, are you able to do that on the road?
Yeah, and I mean it's definitely a job that you can take with you and work remotely, but I haven't done so yet because I haven't really needed to, and I haven't really had the inclination to be honest, if that I'm going to be completely honest. The only stuff I've done on the road has been Love Her Wild stuff, and that's not something that makes me money. But I do kind of I still have that need there for creativity, and that certainly hasn't gone away, but I just want to be able to fulfill that need in ways that are suitable for me rather than maybe working for somebody else.
Yeah. Tell us about Love Her Wild. I mean, I know we've had Bex on, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah. So, it was a quite an amazing story in a way, because I traveled around Africa with Bex, or just over 10 years ago now. And, I think we were at quite different stages of our lives. She was 18 and I was 24, and we didn't really have too much to do with each other on the trip. And it was before the days of Facebook really hadn't got started. So we lost touch as soon as we left Africa, really, and didn't think too much more about it for the next 10 years. And then all of a sudden I went to, I think it was a night of adventure in London, one of the talks run by Alistair Humphreys, and she was stood next to me in the queue, and I was amazed. For a few moments, I just couldn't really do anything because I thought, it's definitely her. I definitely knew it was her. And I just said to her, I know you. We traveled through Africa together. And it was just so unbelievable that we were both stood next to each other. Not even just in the same queue. We were next to each other in the queue. And we arranged to meet for a drink. Turns out we didn't actually live that far from each other. And it was Bex that kind of pitched this idea to me of wanting to inspire and encourage more women to be out in the adventure world and not have it so male, dominated as it is. And we decided to start a blog, and it's kind of gone from there, really. And Bex has been pretty amazing and put a lot more work into it than I have been able to, because I've been away walking and cycling, and I haven't really had too much time, so I can't take too much credit for everything that has been done so far, but I have managed to help out when I can with the design, and that was my involvement really in the project, was to bring some design element to it, and we both have very different skill sets, and I think they complement each other quite well. But there was one when I was in Adelaide, I had to take some time out to make some design changes, and at the time I wasn't carrying a computer or anything. I just had my phone, and everything was proving very difficult. So I went into the Apple store in Adelaide, and they were so awesome in there. They let me sit in there for hours and hours at their computer just working. And I think I was in there for about 5 days, and I was just sat there working at their computers. And everyone was, well, not everyone, a few of the staff would come and chat to me and find out what I'd been doing and find out I was cycling across Australia. And some people would go, "Are you the girl cycling across Australia?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, but I need to do some work. Leave me alone." So that was, you take the opportunity where you can get it. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience, and we're still learning and everything's evolving as we go along. So yeah, it's super fun.
So I do want to talk. I feel bad for missing out to your road, but let's just quickly talk about your cycle tour Australia. Just because you did it I know you did it from June to August 2017. I'm just wondering what your start date was in June.
So my start date was June the 4th.
Oh, if it's been June the 3rd, it would have been another little, synchronicity.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, that's when I started my hike. But let's just take it back a step. So you obviously done a huge amount of walking. Why did you decide to make the transition from your feet to a bike, and why did you decide on Australia?
Well, it was all very kind of spur of the moment decision making at this point, because when I left England, I knew I was going to hike in America, and then I knew I was going to go to New Zealand. And after New Zealand, I really didn't have any plans. To get into New Zealand, you have to have a ticket out of New Zealand. So what I did was I thought I'm going to use the whole of my 6 months allowance in New Zealand, because I had never been before and I wanted to make the most of it. So I purchased a very cheap flight. I think it was only about £60 or something, to Sydney, because I thought, well, I've never been this close to Australia before, and it seems a bit silly not to at least see a little bit of Australia before I maybe come home, because I'm not going to get a ticket for 60 quid from the UK. So I thought, well, I might as well go over there. And then when I had finished hiking the Te Aroa, I kind of thought that I would either be done completely and tired and ready to go home, or I might want to carry on and do something. And I didn't know what that something may be. And when I got to the end of the trail, I decided I wasn't really done yet with the adventure. And I started to look at various different options. And there are some hiking trails in Australia, the Bibbulmun track and the Larapinta trail, for example. And something about them wasn't really capturing my interest, like the previous trails had. So my heart wasn't really in them. And then I started doing a bit of research in Australia, and I thought Australia is huge. It's just unbelievably big, and I thought walking across it is not really that viable, especially as I only get a 3-month tourist visa. And cycle touring had always really intrigued me. Every time I see a cycle tourist, I kind of stare at them and try and see what their setup is, and just think how fun it looks. And I thought, well, maybe I could cycle across Australia. That doesn't seem, I could go a lot faster than I could with walking. So I actually thought about cycling from Sydney to Perth. And then if I had enough time to maybe hike the Bibbulmun or some of the Bibbulmun. But I started talking to a guy I know from the trail, his hometown is Darwin, and I know he's done a lot of cycle touring as well in his past. So I contacted him and said, hey, thinking of doing some cycle touring. And he's the one that suggested I should go from Adelaide to Darwin through the outback and through the Red Centre. And he said it's a great ride. And I'd never thought about it before. But it was one of those moments where the seed was planted and I couldn't get it out of my head. I kept thinking about it. And one of my favorite movies of all time is Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Mm-hmm. And they travel across Australia in a bus, and they go to all sorts of places that are places that I would have to go through. Cooper Pedy, Alice Springs. They go to Kings Canyon, and something about it just thought, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to follow in the footsteps of my movie heroes, and I want to see all these amazing places, which I kind of had never been on my radar before. And so I flew to Sydney, and I bought a bike on the second day I was there. Did a little bit of research online beforehand. My bike cost me... all in with everything, panniers, pumps, lights, you need so much stuff for a bike. It cost me about £980. So I had everything I needed. My budget was under 1,000, so I thought I did quite well. And within a week after I arrived in Sydney, I was setting off from Sydney on my bike with no real plan other than to get to Darwin somehow. I didn't really have a route. I just thought, well, I'll take each day as it comes. And again, the first day was the hardest of all of the days on the cycle. But I ended up really, really loving it. I really enjoyed it. Sydney to Melbourne, and then Melbourne to Adelaide, I was mostly on my own. I only saw 3 other cycle tourists, and they were all going the opposite way to me. So I was kind of resigned myself to this being a very solo adventure. And then somewhere on the Great Ocean Road, I met a couple of German cycle tourists, Simon and Dominic, and they were super friendly, and we found out we were heading the same way, and we didn't really have a plan to cycle together, but we kept overlapping, and we ended up staying in the same place. And by the time we reached Adelaide, we had become better friends, and we decided that it kind of makes sense just to travel together. So we cycled together, not necessarily right next to each other, but we arranged to camp at the same place. And the times we did cycle together was when it was a hideous headwind, and I was able to sneak in behind them and shelter myself from the wind. And Dominic is 6'8", so he's incredibly tall. So, I mean, I would have done nothing being in the front to shelter them. So I was always the lucky one at the back, being able to ride in their slipstream of the wind. So that was pretty cool to be able to meet them, and they were super knowledgeable about bikes. They had built their own bikes. I knew nothing about bikes, so it was great to be able to absorb all their wonderful experience and help me when things went wrong. And yeah, it was a great experience.
Oh my god, it sounds absolutely awesome. What was there any? Do you get low points on any of these? I mean, I want to use the word challenges, but equally, I also know that this is your life as well. So I know that a lot of people, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to vlog my experience was to show people that it's not always glamorous and amazing. It's not like the Instagram photos that, they can get posted. And that sometimes, even though it's a different type of reality, it's almost like a new reality. What was that like for you?
Yeah, there are always low points. I mean, you can't go through 5 months of your life normally at home working, in a normal office-based environment without having up and down days. So it's exactly the same on a trail. You have up and down days. And it's just, I've phoned my parents and cried down the phone to them, and they've got all worried about me. But it's just that moment, and it's not. I think they realize as well that it's not as bad as it seems in that moment, and there will always be opportunity there'll be another day. There'll be, like most things happen when you're cold, tired, hungry, and wet. Those 3 things are really make you feel pretty bad, and those things can all be solved by eating a good meal, getting a good rest, warming up and drying out. So when you're on the trail, there's always a way to make things better. But there have been moments where I felt like giving up, and I have an Instagram account, and it's not all beautiful. There's pictures of me on there crying, and there's pictures of me falling over, and it's not. I never want to portray, and in my blog as well, I write about all the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. And I want to have a very honest account out there of what it is like, because it's not always wonderful. And there are times where you just think, what am I doing? And is it worth it? And, I just want to give up and go home. So yeah, it's very natural, I think, to have those feelings. It's just about how you kind of move on from them and deal with them.
How long did you plan to be on your cycle trip for? Did you know how long it would take you roughly? Do you stick to a schedule, or are you just very relaxed about it?
Well, looking back on it now, it all seems a bit ridiculous, because I had no idea how long it would take me. And all I knew is that I had to get to Darwin before my visa expired, which gave me 3 months. Well, 2 months and 3 weeks now that I'd spent a week in Sydney. And I kind of looked at the numbers and I thought, wow, yeah, that seems doable. And I mean, I could have been stuck somewhere in the outback, like when my visa expired in hindsight, and it would probably been a really stupid idea, but I'm just lucky that it worked out okay. And I did question myself at the start. The first couple of weeks I really struggled. I found it very difficult. My riding position wasn't right. I was getting a lot of pain. I had like claw hand where I couldn't straighten out my fingers. My bum was just in absolute agony. I had like chafe, and I was so uncomfortable. I'd set myself a goal of doing 5 kilometers just so I could get off the bike. And I had to do 5 kilometers, get off the bike, 5 kilometers, get off the bike. And I thought, this isn't going to get me to Darwin. I'm not going to make it to Melbourne at this rate. And I gave myself, I thought it would take me maybe 2 weeks to get to Melbourne, and ended up taking 3. And I thought, this isn't good. But along the way, I made some modifications. I got a new saddle. I got new handlebars. I had someone like adjust my riding position. So yeah, all those things helped. And then it helped to be with Simon and Dominic, because they would maybe push me to go a bit further when sometimes I'd feel like stopping, and they would go, let's just go another 10 kilometers. And I'd be like, 10 kilometers. We've already cycled 120. I can't make it. And I'd have a little strop on the side of the road, but then I'd get on my bike and I'd carry on, and we would make it. And, yeah, so I'm glad that they helped to push me. And it was nice to be able to have, people to make decisions with. But yeah, I kind of set out without really much of a plan, and I just thought, I'll see how it goes. And there was a part of me that thought, maybe I'll hate it. Maybe I won't like cycle touring, even though it looks fun. Maybe it's not for me. And there were definitely days where I thought, this is not for me. And the traffic and the busyness of the roads. And I thought, what am I doing? But in the end, I ended up really enjoying it. And then I've flew from Darwin to Bali, and my bikers come with me. Priscilla, she's called Priscilla. Priscilla's come with me, and we've cycled around Bali and Lombok, and it's been so challenging. It's super hot. It's so hilly. And the traffic is insane. The scooters and the beeping, and the only thing that's good is that nothing is moving very fast. So you kind of, even though it is mad, you do feel reasonably safe just because of the speed is so low. But yeah, the plan has always been to just carry on until I feel like I'm ready to stop.
That sounds fantastic. So which do you prefer then? If you had, the choice is yours for future adventures, but would you do another cycle touring? Would you go walking? What do you prefer?
So I definitely think I'm a hiker at heart more than a biker. But I would never rule out cycle touring. But I definitely think that I'm happier cycle touring with other people. Just to have, I'm definitely not, afraid of my own company, and I'm not afraid of being alone. I just think it's more enjoyable when you're with other people, and you have, like if something goes, there's a lot more that can go wrong on a cycle tour, because when you're hiking, all you have to think about is you and your backpack and whatever is in your backpack. You just have to look after your body mostly. With a cycle tour, you have to look after you, your stuff, and the bike. And the bike, it requires quite a lot of looking after, actually. There's always constant little adjustments that have to be made, and things can go wrong very easily, and they're, for me, hard to fix because I don't know enough about bikes. And I think that in order to do a successful cycle tour, I would have to know a lot more about bikes to feel comfortable doing it by myself. So that would be something that I would definitely look at, doing some kind of course or spending some time in a bike shop and helping out and just getting really to know my bike really well. I mean, Simon and Dominic built their own bikes, so they know them inside out. They've undone and done up every screw on the bike, and mine is very much straight out of the shop. So yeah, there's a certain element of hiking is easier because there's less to worry about. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely, I'd like to hike the Appalachian Trail and the Continental Divide, and I'd like to go and do one of the Caminos. and so many things. So the list is too long.
I mean, you've been on the road sort of like, approximately from 2015, coming up to I was about to say the end of 2017. But what do you think you've learnt the most from leading this life?
It's quite a tough question, but I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that there is no path that you need to follow in life. There's no right or wrong way of doing things. And from all the people I've met who are doing amazing things all over the world, you really have to think about what makes you happy, and don't look at everyone else's life and kind of be envious of what they're doing, because it might not be for you. Walking across the country isn't for everyone, but it's about finding that thing that really does make you happy, and saying that the trail maybe didn't always make me happy. I wasn't happy every day. Some days I cried, and some days I was, felt really low, but ultimately that challenge of overcoming those days makes me happy. So just knowing that there is no normal, and I kind of knew that before, but there is always, you feel that social pressure to follow the majority, and you definitely don't have to do that.
No, absolutely. Now, Alex, you do blog about your adventures and your challenges. Do you just want to share your website and where you are on social media?
Yeah, so I try and maintain a daily blog of my adventures, not so much in Indonesia, but for the hiking and biking, I've got a daily blog, and it's masonalexandra.com, which is just my name backwards. I couldn't have Alexandra Mason because it belonged to an Australian escort girl, so I was like, oh, I can't have that. So yeah, it's Mason Alexandra, and then the same basically on all my Instagram, Twitter, and all that kind of stuff. It's all Mason Alexandra.
Awesome. I'll make sure I include all the links. And I suppose just one final question. Is there a quote that you live your life by, or is there a certain belief, or do you have a mantra, or is there just something that, I don't know, that sort of you believe?
I definitely think that you need, I think, I can't remember where I read it, but it's leave the world a little better than you found it. And I definitely think that I try and lessen the impact I have on the places I go by observing leave no trace principles and all that kind of stuff. And I'm passionate about looking after the planet and the environment, and I raise money for a water charity called Just a Drop with all the adventures I do. So there is an element of that in all of my adventures.
Why did you pick that charity?
Well, I raised a lot of money for cancer research in the past, and I enjoyed doing that, and it was a cause close to my heart, like it is with most people now. And people were very willing to donate, and I managed to raise about £12,000 for them. And I thought I'd maybe come to the end of my ability to keep on fundraising for cancer research. So after I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, when you're getting water out of streams or cow troughs or lakes and it's a bit dodgy, you really kind of start thinking about water and how important it is to life, and how there are so many people in the world that are getting their water out of lakes, but they don't have the luxury of having a filter like I did to filter out any bad stuff. And lots of people walk a very, very long way to get water, and that is their life. They walk to get water, they walk back, and they do that every day. And so I went to speak to Just a Drop, who are a really small charity, and I realized that maybe I could make a lot more difference raising money for them than I could for raising money for a huge charity like cancer research, where people are raising millions for them. My little contribution probably wouldn't make a lot of difference, even though every little helps. It still is a bit like a drop in the ocean for them. But I feel like I could make a lot bigger difference with the smaller charity, and it's something that I had my eyes really opened to when I was hiking through the desert, and arranging your day from water source to water source. So yeah, that's why I chose that charity.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. Alex, you are such an inspiration, and it has been amazing to talk about your journey and your experiences and what you've been through. I will make sure I include all of the links to your website, social media, and to your charity as well that you raise money for. But absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast to share your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Hey tribe, how you doing? I hope you are all ready for October. I know it's going to be a fabulous month, whatever you have got planned. Not long to go now before Christmas time, which I was actually quite sad. I actually Googled how long it is till Christmas, so I know it's less than 100 days, but very, very exciting. So a couple of things to mention. There is going to be a book competition happening in the month of October, and this is open to all patrons. Your name will be going into a hat, and I'll be pulling out 2 winners to win Jenny Tuff's book, Keep the Sea to the Right. So this is a book about one woman's journey to circumnavigate the entire Baltic Sea by bicycle. 3,800 kilometers, 9 countries, 1 sea. And you can go back and listen to Jenny. She's been on the Tough Girl podcast. She shared her story. So I've got 2 copies of her book, and there will be a draw which will take place at the very end of October, and there'll be 2 winners. So 2 patrons. And if you're thinking, what's a patron, Sarah? I don't know what a patron is. Let me tell you what a patron is. So how I fund the running costs of the Tough Girl podcast, the website, the blog, and everything else that I do is via a website called Patreon, patreon.com, which is all about supporting creatives such as myself. So a blogger, a podcaster, and now a vlogger as well. So please do go check it out. You can find the links below in the show notes. The links are also on my webpage. I do regular tweets about it. And you can become a patron and help to support the mission of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring you individually, but it's also about increasing the amount of female role models that we have in the media. It's about creating that ripple effect. So to encourage more women to get out there, to get fit, to get active, to travel, to explore, and to live their fullest lives possible, and to take on these challenges and to step outside their comfort zone. I'm incredibly passionate about this, and I just want to spread this message far and wide, and you can be involved with it. You can donate from $2 a month to $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, $500 a month, whatever it is that you can afford. And if you are from the UK, that works out to something like 50p per podcast episode. So if you get value from listening to the podcast, from reading the blog posts, or from watching me on YouTube, if you haven't checked out my YouTube, then please do go watch the Appalachian Trail vlogs. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Then please do consider becoming a patron, because I tell you what, when you are running or cycling or commuting and a new podcast episode comes out and you start listening to it, you will know that the reason it's being produced is because of you and your financial contribution. It can make it makes a huge difference to me, and I appreciate it so much. So massive thank you to all our newest patrons. I really, really appreciate it. Make sure you go check it out, patreon.com. And if you sign up this month, your name will be going into a draw to win Jenny Tuff's book, and I have 2 copies of that. Just want to do a quick shout out as well to Ellen Piercy, who is out cycling the Camino. I hope you have an incredible time on your trip. I know you will just have an awesome time, because I've been seeing the photos. There's also 3 blogs I think you guys should go and check out if you get a moment. Alison MacArthur, who has just written up her race report from the Loch Ness Marathon. Go and check that out at runningprincess78.wordpress.com. You can also go and learn more about Lucy Edwards, about her travel. I'm going to butcher the name, but out in Croatia at Porac. But her website is pedalpace.co.uk. And Bethany Taylor is tackling the cheese grater effect, which is chafing. So anybody who suffers from chafing, the runner's nemesis, she's just written an article on it, how to tackle chafing, and you can find that at a prettyplacetoplay.com. So lots of amazing blogs. If you are part of the tribe, the closed Facebook group, there is a regular posting which comes out where if you blog, you can share your blog post with other members of the Tough Girl tribe. And I also look to share them on the main Facebook page as well, because I want to give you as much exposure as possible, especially when you're doing these incredible challenges. And, you know, if you're suffering from chafing, or you're going traveling, or you're running these incredible races, it's all about sharing it. And I think it's about taking back the power and the control, and using the power of blogs and podcasts and social media to get women's stories out there. You know, they're not being reported in mainstream media, or they're not being reported to a standard that I would like. I want more women's stories out there, so you can help with that. Thank you so much for your support. Go and check out toughgirlchallenges.com, which is my main website. There are links to everything, and it should all be updated. It is all updated, so please do go check it out. Otherwise, have an amazing day. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. If you could leave a review, that would be awesome. And if you could tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast, that would be incredible, because this is how we spread the message. We are coming up to 400,000 downloads, which is super exciting, which I did think we were going to hit just before October, but it hasn't happened. We're something like 395,000 downloads now. So 5,000 downloads to go before we hit the big 400,000. So super exciting times. Do I have to tell you anything else? Do you know what I do have to say is have an amazing day. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, just go out and smash it. Give it your all. Work hard, go and make it happen. Sign up for that race if you haven't already. Book that holiday if you haven't done it yet. Live your life. Don't worry about what other people think of you. Live your life for you. Have an amazing day, and I will speak to you next Tuesday. There will be another episode of the Tough Girl podcast coming out, as it does every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. All right, lots of love. Take care, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.